You were late again. You're done here.
I was here before my shift.
Where is Marcus?
The first time Marcus Bell was called late. He was standing 12 minutes early. He was in the employee entrance of Halcyon Distribution Center, holding a paper bag with his daughter's unfinished breakfast sandwich inside because he had forgotten to eat before rushing out the door. The warehouse lights above him flickered in their usual pattern, one row warming up after another, while forklifts hummed somewhere beyond the loading bays. Marcus checked the wall clock twice. 5:48 a.m. His shift started at 6. He had learned not to arrive at 5:59. Not after the warning from 3 months earlier when a supervisor told him that people who want to move up don't cut things close. Marcus had nodded, adjusted his schedule, and started leaving his apartment before sunrise every morning. He was a single father. His 8-year-old daughter, Nia, depended on him for everything from breakfast to homework to remembering which science project was due on Friday. Being reliable was not a personality trait for Marcus. It was survival. He wore the same navy work jacket he had worn most mornings for 2 years, the sleeves slightly faded from washing. A small embroidered patch on the chest read, "Inventory Control Specialist." Most new employees did not know what that meant. He assumed Marcus moved boxes. He did not. He tracked the movement of thousands of medical supply units through Halcyon's regional network, making sure shipments arrived where hospitals needed them. His work was mostly invisible when it was done correctly. That was the problem with invisible work. People noticed it only when something went wrong. Marcus, he turned. Daniel Whitmore, the warehouse operations manager, stood near the security desk with a tablet in his hand. Daniel was in his late 40s, always wearing pressed shirts under his company jacket, always speaking in a tone that sounded like he was already explaining a decision someone else had made. "Morning," Marcus said. Daniel looked at the tablet. "You want to tell me why you were late yesterday?" Marcus paused. "Yesterday," Daniel tapped the screen. 7:13 arrival. Marcus looked at him carefully. "My shift yesterday started at 7:30. I was scheduled for the inventory reconciliation team." Daniel's expression did not change. "You were scheduled to be here earlier. I was here at 7:13. That's not the point." Marcus glanced toward the security desk. A young employee named Tyler was scanning his badge nearby. Tyler had started 2 weeks ago and had already missed a morning shift without notice. Marcus remembered Daniel laughing about it and saying, "New guys need time to adjust." Marcus lowered his voice. "Can we look at the schedule? Because I think there's a mistake." Daniel turned the tablet slightly away. "I don't need a lecture on scheduling from you." The words were calm, almost polite. That was what made them difficult. Marcus had learned that some people never raised their voice when they wanted to make you smaller. "I'm not giving a lecture," Marcus said. "I'm asking for the record to be checked." Daniel studied him for a moment. Then he sighed. "See, this is what I'm talking about." Attitude. Every correction becomes an argument. Marcus felt the familiar pressure behind his ribs. Not anger exactly. Something heavier. The exhaustion of knowing that explaining yourself could become another accusation. A woman at the security desk looked up from her monitor. Her name tag read Elena Ruiz. She had worked at Halcyon for 6 years. She knew the schedules. She knew Marcus. She also knew when someone was being careful with their words. Daniel tapped the screen again. "This is your final warning about punctuality." Marcus looked at the tablet. "Final? You've been coached multiple times." "I signed one attendance note." Daniel picked up his jacket. "Then consider this your opportunity to improve." He walked away before Marcus could answer. At 5:57, Marcus scanned his badge and entered the warehouse, 3 minutes before his shift, exactly where he was supposed to be. But by the time he reached his workstation, an unfamiliar red notification was already appearing on the inventory system. "Access review pending." Marcus stared at the screen. His first thought was not that he was in trouble. His first thought was Nia, because if his access disappeared, even temporarily, he knew how quickly a simple mistake could become something much bigger. Behind him, Elena quietly approached. "Marcus," she said. He turned. She looked toward the manager's office. I don't think he checked the schedule. And for the first time that morning, Marcus realized this was not about being late. It was about a story someone had already decided to tell. By 6:20, Marcus still could not open the cycle count dashboard. The warehouse was fully awake now. Pallet jacks rattled across concrete. Backup alarms pulsed near the receiving doors. On the mezzanine, conveyor belts carried sealed cartons toward outbound sorting, while Marcus sat at a terminal that had reduced his job to a gray box reading access restricted. He tried once more. Same message. His supervisor and infantry control, Priya Shah, appeared beside the workstation holding a scanner and a cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. Daniel said you're not supposed to touch reconciliation until he clears you. Marcus turned toward her. Did he say why? Priya hesitated. That was enough. Attendance issue, she said, and something about you refusing direction. Marcus looked back at the screen. I asked him to check yesterday's schedule. I know. You were the one who moved me to 7:30. I know that too. Marcus waited. Priya rubbed her thumb along the cardboard sleeve of her coffee. He sent an email at 6:08. Operations, HR, me. It says you were late, became argumentative when coached, and that restricting system access is precautionary until your reliability is reviewed. Marcus gave a small laugh without humor. Reliability. 2 years earlier, he had rebuilt Halcyon's shortage tracking sheet after a software migration scrambled location codes. Last winter, he had stayed 3 hours past shift to trace a shipment of pediatric tubing that had been routed to the wrong hospital network. Priya had nominated him for a Process Improvement Award because his correction prevented 27 cartons from disappearing into a generic exception queue. None of that seemed to fit inside one red notification. Can you pull yesterday's labor schedule? Marcus asked. Priya glanced toward the glass operations office above the floor. I can. Please do. She did not move. Marcus understood before she spoke. Daniel told managers not to alter or export anything connected to the review. I'm not asking you to alter it. I know. Then pull it up. Priya lowered her voice. Marcus, if I go around him right now, he'll say, I compromised an attendance review, so the schedule can accuse me. But I can't look at the schedule. It's what the situation is saying. The sharpness in his own voice surprised him. Priya's expression changed. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Sorry. No, she said. You're allowed to be angry. Just don't make me the person you spend it on. He nodded. That landed. Across the aisle, Tyler scanned into a picking zone at 6:34 minutes after his posted start time. A floor lead waved him through. No traffic excuses tomorrow, man. Tyler grinned. Promise. Marcus watched the exchange, then looked away before resentment turned into something he would have to carry all morning. At 6:42, Daniel came down from the office with Linda Carver from Human Resources. Linda had the careful posture of someone entering a conversation she believed had already been documented. Marcus, she said, we need a few minutes. They took him to a small training room beside receiving. Daniel sat closest to the door. Linda opened a laptop. We've received concerns regarding punctuality and conduct during coaching conversations. Concerns from who? Daniel answered. This isn't about personalities. Marcus looked at Linda. Can you show me the dates I was late? Linda glanced at her screen. I have 3 attendance incidents. What dates? Daniel shifted in his chair. Marcus, cooperation would help you here. I'm cooperating. I'm asking for the incidents. Linda read the first date. Marcus knew it immediately. It was the snow closure. Second shift was delayed 90 minutes. She stopped. Daniel leaned forward. Employees were still expected to communicate. I did. There's a supervisor text thread. Linda read the second. Chris felt his stomach drop. That was the morning Nia had an asthma attack. He had called before dawn, used approved emergency leave, and arrived for a shortened shift after his neighbor took Nia to school. Linda's fingers paused over the keyboard. And yesterday, she said. My shift started at 7:30. Daniel exhaled. This is exactly the pattern. Every event has an explanation. Marcus stared at him. Yes, he said, because events have facts. Linda's eyes moved between them. For the first time, uncertainty entered her face. Outside the room, Elena Ruiz was finishing her security log from the morning. She had heard enough to know Marcus was being described as late at a time she had personally watched him standing beneath the employee entrance clock. So before ending her shift, she printed the badge entry exception report. Not the whole week, just one page. This bell, 5:48 a.m. She folded it once and slipped it into the inside pocket of her jacket. Inside the training room, Linda closed her laptop. Until we verify the attendance history, your access restriction stays in place. Marcus nodded slowly. The false story had not been corrected. It had been promoted. At 7:06, Marcus's badge stopped opening the inventory cage. He discovered it with his hand still on the metal handle. The reader flashed red once, then returned to standby. For 2 years, that door had opened for him because the cage held the handheld scanners, controlled count sheets, damaged stock seals, and the locked cabinet, where discrepancy reports waited for verification. Without access, Marcus could not perform the core functions of his job. He tried again. Red. A forklift passed behind him carrying shrink-wrapped cartons of saline kits. The driver glanced over, then looked away. Marcus pulled out his phone and checked the message from Priya. "Come upstairs. HR wants to document next steps." He stared at the words longer than he meant to. Then Nia's school number appeared across the top of the screen. His chest tightened. He answered immediately. "Hello, Mr. Bell, this is Miss Carter from East Ridge Elementary. Nia's okay." Marcus exhaled. The teacher continued. "She left her inhaler permission form in her backpack. We just need you to sign the digital copy before recess." "Yeah. Of course." He stepped beside a pallet rack, opened the school portal, and signed with his thumb while machines moved around him. For 30 seconds, he was not an employee under review. He was just Nia's father. He sent her a message afterward. Form signed. "Have a good day. Eat the apple, too." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "The apple is disrespectful." Marcus smiled despite himself. Then the inventory cage reader flashed red again in his peripheral vision, and the smile disappeared. Upstairs, Linda had prepared a form. Daniel stood near the window overlooking the warehouse floor. Priya sat at the end of the table. Linda pushed the document toward Marcus. "Effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative leave pending an attendance and conduct review." Marcus did not touch the paper. "Paid?" Linda hesitated. "Pending determination." Priya looked up sharply. Daniel folded his arms. Marcus read the first paragraph. It described repeated tardiness, failure to meet operational expectations, and resistance to supervisory coaching. His eyes stopped at the final sentence. "Employee access revoked due to reliability concerns affecting inventory integrity." He looked at Daniel. "You're connecting attendance to inventory integrity now." Daniel's mouth tightened. "You have privileged system access, so do 6 other people, and we have to manage risk." Marcus looked toward Linda. "What inventory incident did I cause?" Linda said nothing. "What count did I miss?" Silence. "What shipment did I compromise?" Daniel answered. "This isn't a courtroom." "No. It's my paycheck." Priya shifted in her chair. Daniel turned toward her. "Priya, you don't need to participate in this." She looked at him for a moment. "I supervise his inventory work. This is an operations matter." It became an inventory matter when you wrote that sentence. Daniel's expression hardened. Marcus should have felt grateful. Instead, frustration broke through. "Then why didn't you say that 20 minutes ago?" Priya stared at him. The question came out harsher than he intended. Marcus knew it the second he heard it. Priya's face closed. "I was trying to keep you employed." Marcus looked down. There it was, the mistake he could not pull back. Not the discrimination, not the false record. His own fear redirected at the person trying to help him. "I know," he said. "That wasn't fair." Daniel tapped the form. "We're done here." Marcus read the signature line. Signing acknowledged receipt, not agreement. He knew that. Still, his hand felt heavy when he picked up the pen. Before signing, he wrote beneath his name, "I dispute the attendance record and request preservation of scheduling, badge access, HR, and system permission records related to this action." Linda leaned forward. "What are you writing?" "A preservation request." Daniel gave a short laugh. "Really? You think somebody's deleting records?" Marcus capped the pen. "I think I'm being accused using recs nobody will show me." He signed. That was the irreversible line. His access had been revoked. His pay had stopped. And somewhere in the company system, the words inventory integrity were now attached to his name. Marcus stood. Priya did not look at him. He wanted to apologize again, but Daniel was already holding the door open. Downstairs, Elena was waiting near the employee exit. She did not hand Marcus the printed badge report, not yet. Instead, she asked one question. "Did you put anything in writing?" Marcus nodded. "Preservation request." Elena's shoulders loosened slightly. Good. Marcus studied her. "Why?" She glanced toward the security office, where badge entry data rolled into a tool did not control. "Because now," she said, "they know exactly what they're supposed to keep." Marcus walked out carrying his lunch bag, his jacket, and a copy of the leave notice. Behind him, Linda returned to her desk and opened the personnel file. 3 attendance incidents. She clicked the first, then the second. By the time she reached the schedule attached to the third, she was no longer reading Marcus's file the way Daniel had summarized it. She was checking who had entered the information. Marcus did not tell Nia he had been sent home. Not immediately. At 3:18 that afternoon, he was standing in their apartment kitchen cutting chicken into strips, while she sat at the table building a model bridge out of craft sticks. The apartment smelled faintly of garlic and the lemon cleaner Marcus used on the counters because Nia insisted anything stronger smelled like a hospital pretending to be a bathroom. "You're home early," she said. Inventory day got weird. Pressed 2 sticks together and frowned at the glue seam. "That means bad." Marcus looked over. "Then did you get good at translation?" "I'm 8. Right. Veteran." She smiled. He turned back to the cutting board. The refrigerator hummed behind him. A school calendar was held to its door by 3 magnets, and Friday had been circled twice. Science night. Marcus had promised he would be there, not try, not if work lets me. There. He had missed enough things during the years when Nia's mother was sick. After she died, he made himself one rule. When he promised his daughter his presence, he treated it like a contract. His phone vibrated on the counter. Priya. Marcus watched it ring. He let it stop, then felt ashamed. Nia looked up from the bridge. "You gonna call her back?" Marcus blinked. "How do you know it's a her? You look guilty. That is a dangerous amount of observation." She shrugged and returned to the glue. Marcus washed his hands and called Priya. She answered on the second ring. "Before I could talk to you. I was removed from the building. I know." Her voice still carried the distance from the conference room. Marcus leaned against the counter. "I shouldn't have snapped at you." "No, I was scared. I know that too. That made it worse somehow." Priya lowered her voice. "Linda is checking the attendance entries." Marcus straightened. "And? The snow day incident wasn't entered when it happened." "When was it entered?" "This morning." Marcus stopped moving. Priya continued. "Same with the emergency leave day." "Who entered them?" "I can't see the administrator history." "Can Linda? She should be able to." Marcus stared at the cabinet above the stove. This was no longer a manager remembering events differently. Someone had taken old dates and converted them into disciplinary history after the fact. "Did Daniel do it?" "I don't know." "Priya, I said I don't know." Her tone sharpened. Marcus closed his mouth. She was right. He was doing it again, trying to force certainty because uncertainty frightened him. Priya continued. "There's another problem." "What?" "The shortage queue." Marcus turned away from Nia. "What about it?" "Daniel told receiving to clear 3 exception pallets without your reconciliation." Marcus frowned. "That queue has hospital allocation holds." "You told them." "And?" Operations couldn't stop because one employee was unavailable." Marcus shut his eyes. The exception pallets were not dangerous by themselves. But some medical products were assigned by contract to specific hospital groups during low supply periods. If receiving released them under ordinary routing, the system could send them wherever demand looked highest instead of where allocation rules required. "When do they clear?" "Tonight." Marcus checked the clock. "Then you need to stop them." "I can't over retaliations. You supervise reconciliation. And you know what Daniel did this morning." Marcus looked at Nia. She was holding the bridge upright now, testing whether the center span could support a small plastic dinosaur. Friday science night. He had been helping her for 3 weeks. "Call compliance," Marcus said. Priya was quiet. "That turns this into something bigger. It already is. And if the pallets are fine, then somebody verifies them and everybody goes home annoyed. If they're not," Marcus looked at the leave notice lying beneath his keys, "then we find out whether Daniel removed me because he thought I was late or because he needed my controls out of the way." He regretted the sentence as soon as he said it. It sounded too clean, too suspicious. Priya heard it too. "Don't build a conspiracy because you're angry." Marcus rubbed his forehead. "You're right. Good. But freeze the pallets. I'll request the hold." After they hung up, Marcus stood in the kitchen with the knife untouched on the board. Priya lifted her bridge. "Dad? Yeah? If one side is wrong, does the whole thing fall?" Marcus looked at the crooked center span. "Not always." She waited. He picked up another craft stick and sat beside her. "Sometimes you brace it before you figure out what went wrong." At 4:02, Priya submitted an operational hold on the 3 exception pallets. At 4:11, Daniel denied it. At 4:16, she forwarded both actions to regional compliance. And at 4:23, Linda opened the administrative history behind Marcus's attendance file. 2 old incidents had been added that morning. Both had been entered from Daniel Whitmore's manager account. At 5:12 that evening, Linda Carver stopped calling it an attendance review. She was still in her office when Regional Compliance joined the video call. Priya sat 2 floors below in a glass booth beside receiving, while Daniel appeared from the operations conference room with the expression of a man irritated by paperwork that should have stayed small. On Linda's screen were 4 timestamps. The first 2 belonged to Marcus Bell's supposed attendance violation. The next 2 showed when those violations had actually been entered. Both entries were created that morning. Both came from Daniel's manager account. Linda shared her screen. "Can you explain this?" Daniel leaned closer. "I document prior coaching that should have been entered earlier. 3 months later, I had notes." "Where?" He paused. "In my manager files." The compliance officer, Renee Foster, spoke for the first time. "Were those notes created at the time of the incidents?" Daniel looked toward his camera. "I'd have to check." Renee did not answer immediately. She had spent 15 years reviewing operational disputes, and Linda could hear the change in her cadence. Fewer words, more precision. "Then check before you characterize them as contemporaneous." Daniel's face tightened. Linda opened the snow day record. The facility delayed second shift because of road conditions. Marcus was not late under the revised start time. Daniel said employees were still expected to communicate. "He did," Priya said. She uploaded the supervisor message thread. Marcus had reported his arrival estimate 47 minutes before the adjusted start. Linda opened the second incident. "Emergency leave." "Approved, documented, no attendance penalty authorized." Daniel leaned back. "Fine. Then those entries can be corrected." Renee looked at him. "The question is not whether they can be corrected." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What is the question? Why they were created on the same morning you used them to justify removing an employee from paid work?" No one spoke for several seconds. Then Daniel did what Linda had watched managers do when a clean explanation was no longer available. He widened the subject. He had broader reliability concerns. "Such as?" Renee asked. "His demeanor, his unwillingness to accept coaching, the risk of keeping elevated access with someone who becomes adversarial." Priya's mouth opened, but Linda spoke first. "What inventory incident supports the access restriction?" Daniel looked at her. "It was precautionary." "Against what specific risk?" Daniel hesitated again. That was the moment the argument changed shape. Not because anyone had discovered Marcus was important. Because the justification for removing him could no longer survive contact with its own paperwork. Renee asked Priya about the 3 exception pallets. Priya explained the allocation holds, the reconciliation requirement, and Daniel's decision to deny her request to freeze the release. Daniel shook his head. "You're connecting unrelated issues." "Maybe," Renee said. "So we test that." She issued 3 instructions. The pallets were placed under a regional compliance hold. Marcus's attendance file was locked against further edits, and Halcyon's internal audit team was instructed to preserve manager action logs, scheduling revisions, access control changes, and reconciliation overrides for the previous 90 days. And Daniel stared at the screen. "You're freezing outbound medical inventory based on an HR complaint?" "No," Renee said. "I'm freezing 3 exception pallets because their required verification was bypassed after the verifier's access was removed." Daniel glanced toward Priya. "This will delay delivery. If the allocations are correct, the delay will be short, and if hospitals complain, then we explain why the control exists." The call ended at 5:39. Marcus knew none of it yet. He was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor while Nia's bridge underwent what she called the dinosaur test. The first plastic dinosaur crossed safely. The second caused the center span to sag. Nia groaned. Marcus reached for the glue. "No, wait," she blocked his hand. "You always fix it before I see why it broke." Marcus looked at her. "Do I?" "Yes." He sat back. Nia turned the bridge over, studying the supports. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "HR asked security to preserve badge entries. I gave them the report." Did it twice. Then another message arrived. "Priya, compliance froze the pallets. They're auditing the entries. Don't call Daniel, don't come in. Let the logs speak first." Marcus felt relief arrive and immediately distrusted it. He wanted to call. He wanted to demand answers. Instead, he set the phone face down. Nia found a problem with the bridge herself. One support had been glued at an angle, forcing the weight onto the wrong joint. "There," she said. Marcus smiled. "There." At Halcyon, the 3 pallets remained behind yellow hold tape. Audit staff began comparing allocation records against the overnight release queue. The first pallet matched. The second matched. The third did not. 46 cartons of respiratory supplies had been reassigned to a commercial clinic network, even though they were reserved for 2 hospital systems under shortage allocation. Priya stared at the routing history. The override had been entered 4 days earlier, before Marcus was accused of being late. And the user account attached to that override belonged to Daniel Whitmore. By 6:30 the next morning, the 46 cartons were no longer the only problem. Regional Audit had traced the override backward through the distribution system. Daniel had not simply redirected one shipment. He had used an exception code intended for temporary demand balancing, then approved the same adjustment from his manager account. On paper, that could still have been explained as a mistake. The destination made it harder. The commercial clinic network receiving the respiratory supplies had recently become one of Halcyon's fastest-growing private accounts. Its contract carried aggressive fulfillment targets. Missing those targets affected the warehouse's quarterly performance score. The 2 hospital systems that originally held the allocation did not affect Daniel's bonus metrics in the same way. Renee Foster stood beside the held pallets with an auditor named Caleb Morris, while Priya scanned carton labels one by one. The receiving floor smelled of cardboard dust and machine oil. Yellow tape marked the perimeter around the pallets, forcing forklifts to detour around them. Daniel arrived without his jacket. "Exactly are we proving by keeping product on the floor?" Renee held out the routing sheet. "That the allocation changed. You already know that. We know the system says it changed. Same thing." Caleb looked up from his handheld scanner. "No." Daniel stared at him. Caleb continued. "The system tells us an override happened. It doesn't tell us whether the override was authorized under the shortage protocol." Daniel gave a thin smile. "I authorized it." "That isn't the question either." Priya scanned the final carton. A warning tone sounded. She turned the screen toward Renee. The lot number was tied to a restricted allocation rule that required inventory control confirmation before reassignment. Marcus Bell's confirmation. Daniel's face changed only slightly. Marcus wasn't available. Priya looked at him. "The override was 4 days ago." Daniel said nothing. "Marcus was here 4 days ago. I was managing urgent demand." "And did you ask him to review it?" Daniel shifted his weight. "Remember." Priya did. She remembered Marcus stopping by her desk late Monday afternoon with a reconciliation list and asking why one clinic account suddenly showed priority above 2 hospital systems. She had been answering 3 messages at once. She had told him she would look at it later. Then she forgot. Realization sat badly in her stomach. Renee asked, "Was anyone else authorized to sign off?" "Not for that allocation class," Priya said. Daniel turned toward her. "You're making this sound criminal." "I didn't say that. You're implying I stole medical supplies." "No," Renee said. "We're checking whether you bypassed a control." Daniel looked at the hold tape around the pallets. And because Marcus happened to be the assigned verifier, suddenly his attendance complaint becomes part of this. Renee folded the routing sheet. "Not automatically." Daniel's shoulders eased. Then she added, "That's why we're testing the timeline." At 7:05, Linda called Marcus. He was pouring cereal for Nia before school. "I need to tell you 2 things," she said. Marcus put the milk down. "Okay. Your leave status has been changed to paid pending review." He closed his eyes for a moment. It was not reinstatement. It was not an apology. But rent no longer felt like a countdown. "And the second, we need you to participate in a controlled verification today." Marcus looked toward Nia, who was reading the back of the cereal box. "For what?" "An allocation override." He already knew. "The respiratory cartons?" Linda paused. "How did you know?" "I flagged that account on Monday." That sentence changed the call. Linda asked him to explain. Marcus told her about the unusual priority shift, the restricted lot numbers, and the reconciliation list he had prepared. He also told her something he had not told Priya. He had made a mistake. "I saw the discrepancy," he said, "but I didn't escalate it." "Why not?" "Because I thought Priya would handle it." Across the kitchen, Nia looked up. Marcus lowered his voice. "And because I didn't want Daniel saying I was going around people again." Linda was quiet. There it was. The personal cost of being repeatedly treated as difficult. Eventually, even correct caution could teach a person to hesitate. At 9:40, Marcus entered Halcyon through the visitor door. His employee badge remained disabled. Renee met him at security and issued a temporary audit credential. Daniel was nowhere in sight. Elena was. She gave Marcus a small nod, then returned to her monitor. No congratulations. Dramatic smile. Just recognition. In the reconciliation bay, Caleb placed the disputed routing record beside a clean copy of the shortage protocol. "We're not asking whether Daniel made the override," he said. "We know he did." Marcus looked at the documents. "What are you asking?" "Whether the shipment could legally pass your control under the rule that existed that day." Marcus pulled a scanner toward him. "Then we need the original allocation table, not today's." Caleb looked at Renee. Renee nodded. They restored the archived version. Marcus compared the lot numbers. 3 minutes later, he stopped. The override could not have passed. Not because Daniel lacked manager authority. Because the software required an inventory control confirmation field, and someone had entered one. Marcus stared at the initials on the archived transaction. MB, his initials. He had never approved it, and suddenly the question was no longer why Daniel wanted him out of the way. It was who had made the system look as though Marcus had already agreed. The initials were not enough. Marcus knew that before anyone said it. MB could have been typed by anybody with the right access, he said. Caleb nodded. Exactly. Renee pulled a chair closer to the audit terminal. They were no longer reviewing attendance records. The room had narrowed to a transaction created 4 days earlier, a restricted allocation, and a confirmation field that made it appear Marcus had approved something he had actually questioned. Daniel entered 10 minutes later with Linda beside him. He looked at Marcus first, not surprised. Annoyed. "Why is he here?" Renee answered without looking away from the screen. "Controlled verification." Daniel glanced at Marcus's temporary credential. "He's under review. So are you." That ended the first argument. Caleb projected the archived transaction onto the wall. The override showed Daniel as the manager who changed the destination. The confirmation field showed MB. The authorization path appeared complete. Daniel pointed at it. "There." Marcus approved it. Marcus leaned forward. "No, it has your initials. My initials aren't authentication." Daniel gave him a tired look. "You're saying the system forged your identity." "I'm saying that field isn't supposed to accept typed initials." Caleb turned. "What is it supposed to accept?" Marcus reached for the scanner. A verifier scans the allocation sheet barcode, then badges into the confirmation prompt. The initials populate from the credential. Priya arrived from receiving carrying the original control binder. She placed it on the table. "I checked the procedure." Daniel looked at her. "You're taking his word for it now?" Priya opened the binder. "No. I'm reading the procedure I should read Monday." Marcus looked at her. The admission was small, but it mattered. Caleb restored the archived interface in the test environment. Marcus demonstrated the normal workflow. He scanned a sample lot. The system asked for a verifier credential. He tapped the temporary audit badge. The confirmation field filled automatically. No typing. Caleb reset it. "Can the field be bypassed?" Marcus shook his head. "Not from the inventory side." Daniel folded his arms. "Then this proves Marcus used his credential." "No," Marcus said. "It proves somebody used a credential path." Renee looked at Caleb. "Pull authentication history for that transaction." Daniel stood straighter. "Log isn't necessary." Renee finally looked at him. "Why? Because we already know who approved it. You just told us the initials were proof." "They are." "Then the authentication log should agree with you." Daniel's mouth tightened. Caleb searched the archived security trail. The transaction had been created at 4:38 p.m. Monday. Marcus remembered the time because he had been in aisle 14 performing a physical count on infusion pumps. Caleb opened the authentication entry. The room became very still. The verifier token tied to MB had not come from Marcus's badge. It came from a shared emergency credential, assigned to the operations manager's office. Linda spoke first. "Why does that credential populate Marcus's initials?" Caleb enlarged the metadata. It didn't. He opened a second layer. The initials were manually written into the transaction note after emergency authorization. Marcus felt something settle in his stomach, not triumph. Ignition. The system had not been tricked into believing he approved the shipment. Someone had bypassed his approval, then typed his initials into the note so a later reviewer might assume he had. Renee turned toward Daniel. Did you use the emergency credential? Daniel's reply came quickly. We have. We had product waiting. Did Marcus authorize the reassignment? He raised no formal objection. Marcus stared at him. I brought Priya a discrepancy list. That isn't a formal objection. You never asked me to approve it. Daniel's voice sharpened. You knew the account needed product. So did the hospitals. Daniel looked around the room. This is being distorted. I made an operational decision under pressure. Marcus had been increasingly difficult, and when I reviewed his attendance, I had legitimate concerns about whether he should retain privileged access. Linda opened her laptop. The attendance incidents were entered after the override. Daniel stopped, she continued. The first entry was created at 5:31 yesterday morning, the second at 5:36. Marcus was confronted at 5:48. Renee asked, when did you decide to restrict his access? Daniel looked toward the projection. I don't remember exactly. Caleb opened another log. 5:41 a.m., a permission change request from Daniel's account. He submitted 7 minutes before Marcus entered the warehouse. Marcus looked at the timestamp. The accusation had existed before the conversation, before the supposed attitude, before he asked Daniel to check the schedule. Linda closed her laptop. I need to correct something, she said. I treated Daniel's summary as established fact before I verified the underlying entries. Marcus said nothing. She looked directly at him. That was a failure in this review. Renee returned to Daniel. The attendance issue is now separate. The question in front of us is whether you bypassed an allocation control, attributed approval to an employee who did not give it, then created disciplinary history before removing his access. Daniel's face reddened. I was protecting operations. Renee gathered the printed logs. Then you'll have the opportunity to explain exactly how each of those actions protected it. She issued the decision before the meeting ended. Daniel was removed from operational authority pending investigation. His system credentials were suspended. The 3 pallets would be rerouted according to the original hospital allocation. Marcus's employment status would remain paid leave until HR completed its separate correction. Daniel pushed his chair back. So he walks back in because you found a technicality? Marcus looked at him. For the first time all week, he did not feel the need to defend himself. Priya answered instead. No. She closed the control binder. He comes back because the thing you called a technicality was his job. Marcus was not reinstated that afternoon. Linda made that clear before anyone left the audit room. Your attendance record is being corrected, she said. The unpaid leave is reversed, but because your credentials were used in a disputed transaction, we need security to complete the access review before we restore full permissions. Marcus stared at her. You know I didn't use the credential. We know the emergency token came from operations. That's different from not knowing whether I did it. I understand. No, Marcus said. You understand the system. I'm asking whether you understand what it means to go home again after all this and tell my daughter I still don't have my job back. Linda's expression tightened. There was no policy sentence available for that. Renee stepped in. The access review is 48 hours maximum. Paid status continues. Ellie, you are not under disciplinary review. Marcus looked at the temporary badge on the table. 2 days. Science night was tomorrow. A month earlier, he would have taken the overtime without thinking because rent, groceries, and Nia's inhaler copays did not care about promises. Now the schedule had shifted beneath him again, only this time in his favor, and he still felt as if someone else controlled the clock. What happens to Daniel? He asked. Renee did not soften the answer. He is suspended from duty pending a formal investigation. That is not termination. Marcus nodded. He appreciated the distinction. He did not need Daniel marched out for the story to be true. He needed the record fixed. He needed the hospitals to receive the supplies. He needed nobody else's initials inserted where consents was supposed to exist. Downstairs, the 46 cartons were removed from the commercial shipment and reprocessed under the original shortage allocation. Priya watched the labels print with the 2 hospital destinations restored. The first pallet left the hold area at 2:17. Marcus stood behind the yellow line while a forklift carried it toward outbound staging. That was the first thing all day that felt like a result instead of an argument. Priya came beside him. You should make tonight's line haul. Good. She folded her arms. I should've escalated Monday. Marcus watched the pallet disappear between 2 rack rows. I should've pushed harder. No. He looked at her. Priya shook her head. Don't make this symmetrical because it feels cleaner. Is it? I said I'd look, then I forgot. Marcus let that sit. You were right about one thing, though, she said. What? You did get angry at me because you couldn't get to him. Marcus winced. Yeah. I'm still annoyed. Fair. But I'm not done helping. That surprised a laugh out of him. It was the first normal sound he had made inside Halcyon since the week began. At 3:06, Linda sent a written correction to everyone who had received Daniel's original notice. The attendance incidents were removed. The reference to inventory integrity concerns was withdrawn. Marcus's unpaid leave was converted to paid administrative leave from the moment he had been sent home. The correction did not call him exemplary. It did something better. It said the allegations used to justify the action were not supported by the verified records. Marcus read the message twice. Then he forwarded it to his personal email. Not because he distrusted Linda specifically. Because he had learned what happened when the version stored inside an organization became the only version allowed to exist. At home that evening, Nia had covered half the dining table with craft sticks, glue, index cards, and 3 plastic dinosaurs. Marcus set his phone beside the fruit bowl. Test tomorrow. She nodded gravely. The bridge has to hold 6 pounds. That seems excessive. That's science. Marcus sat across from her. He had planned to tell her everything only after the job was safe. That had been his instinct since her mother died. Keep uncertainty outside the apartment until he could turn it into an answer. But Nia was already living inside the consequences. So he told her a simpler version. My manager said some things about me that weren't true. Work is fixing it. She stopped arranging the dinosaurs. Did you get fired? Not exactly. Are you going to? I don't think so. She absorbed that. Then came the question he had been avoiding. Are you coming tomorrow, science night? Marcus looked at the 48-hour access review notice on his phone. If security cleared him early, Halcyon could ask him to return before the evening shift ended. Reconciliation was already behind. Part of him wanted to walk back in the second they called, prove reliability so thoroughly nobody could ever question it again. The impulse felt familiar and suddenly unhealthy. I'm coming, he said. Nia studied him. Even if work calls. Marcus picked up one of the loose craft sticks. Even if work calls. The next morning, Halcyon Security completed its review. Marcus's badge had never authenticated the disputed override. His full access was cleared for restoration. But Renee attached one condition before the system went live. No manager could use the emergency authorization path again until the confirmation process was redesigned. For the first time, the fix was no longer about Marcus alone. It had reached the control that made what happened to him possible. Marcus returned to Halcyon on Monday morning, not at 5:48. At 5:43. He noticed the time the second he entered the employee vestibule and almost laughed at himself. The habit had survived the accusation. Elena was behind the security desk, finishing an overnight handoff. She slid his badge across the counter after verifying the restored access. Try it. Marcus tapped the reader. The sound was ordinary. That made it better. No ceremony, he asked. Elena raised an eyebrow. Teacher, you want balloons at 5 in the morning? I'd settle for coffee. Machine's broken. Of course it is. She smiled and went back to her log. On the warehouse floor, the change was more visible. The emergency authorization option had been disabled from the operations menu. Any shortage allocation override now required 2 separate credentials, one from operations and one from inventory control. If the verifiers was absent, the shipment remained on hold until a qualified replacement was assigned. Initials could be typed into the confirmation note. Priya showed Marcus the revised screen. They pushed the update Friday night. Fast. Rainey scared people. That works. Priya gave him a look. Don't enjoy it too much. Marcus glanced at her, then nodded. She was right. Again, the formal investigation into Daniel was still underway. Marcus had read enough of Linda's correction to understand that suspension was not the same as guilt being fully adjudicated. There would be interviews, review of manager logs, and a determination about whether the attendance entries were deliberate retaliation or reckless documentation. Marcus did not need to predict the outcome. He needed to work. His first assignment was the backlog from the 48 hours he had been locked out. By 8:10, he had cleared 11 discrepancy cases. At 8:24, Tyler appeared beside his station, holding 2 scanners. Got a second? Marcus looked up. Tyler seemed uncomfortable. Yeah. Tyler set one scanner down. I heard about the attendance thing. Marcus waited. Tyler rubbed the back of his neck. It was late that morning. I remember. Daniel joked about traffic. Marcus said nothing. Tyler looked toward the floor. I heard how he talked to you before shift. I didn't say anything. You didn't know what was happening. I knew enough to notice it wasn't the way he talked to me. That was different. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Tyler continued. HR asked if anyone saw the conversation. I gave a statement. Marcus studied him. Why? Tyler swallowed. Because I kept thinking about how easy it was for me to be late and still be treated like a guy having a rough morning. He stopped there. Speech. No apology polished enough to erase anything. Just the difference named plainly. Marcus nodded once. Thanks for telling them. Tyler picked up the scanner. I should said something then. Probably. Tyler accepted that. Then he went back to work. At noon, Linda asked Marcus to meet in the training room. He almost refused on instinct. The room still carried the memory of the unpaid leave form. He entered. There was no document waiting for his signature. Only Linda and Renee. Linda spoke first. The investigation found Daniel used the emergency credential to bypass the allocation control. It also found he entered 2 historical attendance incidents after deciding to restrict your access. Marcus sat very still. Did he say why? He said he believed your prior attendance and conduct justified removing you from a sensitive role. Marcus looked at Renee, and Renee answered. The panel found the records did not support that explanation. They concluded the attendance entries were created to strengthen a decision already made. Marcus exhaled through his nose. Linda continued. Daniel's employment has been terminated. The sentence did not feel the way Marcus had imagined. No rush, no relief big enough to fill the room. Just finality. Linda slid a second document across the table. Halcyon was restoring Marcus's lost wages, removing all related disciplinary material, and adding an independent review step whenever restricted system access was removed for conduct reasons. Regional HR would also audit 90 days of attendance discipline across the warehouse for inconsistent enforcement. Marcus read the last paragraph. What happens if you find other people? Their records get reviewed individually, Linda said. And supervisors? Same. Marcus looked at her. Including managers who just went along with it? Linda held his gaze. Including HR decisions. That mattered more than he expected. That evening, Marcus and Naya sat at the kitchen table eating reheated pasta. Her bridge had survived science night, 6 pounds. Barely. She had won no prize, which she described as politically suspicious. Marcus laughed. His phone buzzed once. An email from Priya. The hospital systems had confirmed receipt of the respiratory supplies. And he showed Naya the message without explaining all of it. Good news? She asked. Yeah. She pointed her fork at him. Work good now? Marcus considered the question. Better. Naya nodded as if that was acceptable. On Monday, he had tapped a badge reader and watched it turn green. Tonight, he hung the badge on the hook by the door and left it there. For once, he did not check whether it was ready for morning. 3 weeks later, Marcus was halfway through reconciling a shipment of cardiac monitors when Priya appeared at the end of the aisle. You're wanted upstairs. Marcus kept scanning. Who? The CEO. He stopped. Priya tried not to smile. That sounded dramatic. It is dramatic. Marcus set the scanner in its cradle. Halcyon's chief executive, Andre Collins, had never visited their distribution center during Marcus's 2 years there. Employees knew his face from quarterly videos and benefits announcements, usually framed by polished conference rooms far removed from receiving docs and damaged carton reports. Marcus glanced at Priya. Why is he here? Regional review. That doesn't answer the question. I know. Upstairs, the main conference room was full enough that Marcus considered turning around. Renee was there. Linda, too. 2 regional executives sat near the far end. Tina had been asked to join for part of the discussion, along with Tyler and a representative from internal audit. Andre Collins stood beside the window. He was in his early 50s, black, broad-shouldered, wearing no tie. What Marcus noticed first was not his title or his clothes. It was the stack of printed attendance audits in front of him. Andre looked toward Linda. Where is he? Marcus stopped in the doorway. Linda turned. There. Andre crossed the room and offered his hand. Marcus Bell? Yes, sir. Andre is fine. Marcus shook it. Andre did not congratulate him. He did not say he had heard Marcus was exceptional. Instead, he pointed toward the chair beside Renee. I'd like you here because several decisions were made about you before anyone bothered to verify the systems those decisions depended on. Marcus sat. The regional audit had expanded beyond Daniel. 14 attendance actions from the previous 90 days had been reviewed. 3 required correction because approved leave or revised schedules had been treated as tardiness. 2 employees had received written warnings under standards that had not been applied consistently across their teams. None of those cases were identical to Marcus's. That mattered. The problem was not a secret list of employees selected for punishment. It was a management culture that allowed supervisors to summarize records before HR checked them, combined with enough discretion that some workers received patience while others received documentation. Andre tapped the audit. We built a process where the person telling the story had too much control over which facts entered the story. Marcus thought of Daniel's tablet at 5:48 in the morning. "What changes?" he asked. Andre seemed pleased by the question, not because it was flattering, because it skipped him. Halcyon had already approved 4 changes. Attendance discipline would now require source verification against scheduling and approved leave records. Managers could no longer create historical attendance incidents beyond a short correction window without HR review. Restricted access decisions required a written operational basis separate from conduct language, and quarterly audits would compare enforcement patterns across supervisors rather than merely counting total violations. Linda would remain in her role. She had expected otherwise. Still, her own review found that she had relied too heavily on Daniel's characterization. The investigators also documented that she reopened the underlying records once inconsistencies appeared and preserved the audit trail instead of protecting the original decision. Accountability, Marcus realized, was more complicated than removing everyone who had been wrong. Sometimes it meant requiring people to work differently afterward. After the meeting, Andre caught Marcus near the elevator. "I heard you were nominated for process improvement last year." Marcus almost laughed. "Apparently my file contains positive documents too," Andre smiled. Then his expression settled. "There's an inventory controls analyst opening at regional headquarters." Marcus immediately shook his head. "I'm not looking for a reward." "It isn't one. Interviews start next month. You'll apply or don't." Marcus studied him. "What would the job be?" "Finding places where our controls say one thing in operations teaches people to do another." That sounded uncomfortably familiar. Marcus thought of Nia. Headquarters meant a longer commute, better pay, 8 different hours. Another promise he would have to learn how to keep. "I'll read the posting," he said. "That's all I'm asking." That evening, Nia found him at the kitchen table with the application open on his laptop. She dropped her backpack beside him. "You doing homework? Something like that." She leaned over his shoulder. "New job?" "Maybe. Will you still come to science night?" Marcus looked at her. There it was. The question underneath every promotion, every paycheck, every decision he had made since becoming the only parent in the apartment. He closed the laptop halfway. "If I take it, we figure that part out first." Nia considered this, then pulled her battered craft stick bridge from her backpack. One support had cracked. "Can you fix this?" Marcus reached for the glue, then stopped. "You want me to fix it, or do you want me to help you figure out why it broke?" Nia narrowed her eyes. "That sounds like work talk." "It might be." She pushed the bridge toward him anyway. Marcus opened the laptop again, only after they had found the cracked joint together. The application was still waiting. For once, the next question in his life was not whether someone would let him stay. It was whether the place asking him to step forward was worth the time it would ask him to give.